Terrorist designation is going to go into effect today for Venezuela's infamous Cartel de los Soles. The White House claims the group is directly tied to the Maduro regime and is responsible for drug trafficking into the U.S. So this move allows the Trump administration to, for instance, freeze assets tied to the cartel as it makes the case for military strikes against Venezuela. Over the weekend, 3 international airlines canceled flights from Venezuela as the FAA warns of a potentially hazardous situation. The idea of military action against Venezuela is something even the president's allies are warning against.
I think you'll see a splintering and a fracturing of the movement that has supported the president, because I think a lot of people, including myself, were attracted to the president because of his reticence to get us involved in foreign war.
Group chat is back. Sabrina, I know you've been following this for a long time. I do know people talk.
Okay, so let's dive into this. If you pay attention, when the current administration first got into office, the main thing they were harping about was China shipping chemicals through Mexico, and then they were manufacturing fentanyl in Mexico and then shipping it over to the US. We hadn't heard anything about that here as of months. So this is just me thinking and speculating. They have shifted their focus hard to Venezuela. So either they have gotten with China and somehow cut that bottleneck off, or negotiated something with China, and then it's being rerouted through Venezuela, or Venezuela has been the culprit all along. But bottom line is that Trump and the administration would not be doing this if it wasn't some type of threat as far as like drugs. People are, I think, taking it out of context when they saying, oh, he's trying to topple this regime and this, that. Yes, that is true, but it's a reason behind it. And I really do think that it's the fentanyl and the drugs that are coming in. Now, if you want to get into them legally being able to just randomly shoot missiles from warships and blow up boats, I don't want to deep dive into that. I personally think that it's illegal and it shouldn't be done that way. But bottom line is the U.S. has other avenues they can go down to slow down this trafficking and put pressure on Venezuela. They don't have to do it in a fear-mongering, war-threatening manner. But another point I want to raise, and a lot of people don't know this, but Venezuela, back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the oil that they produced was prominently controlled by American companies. And as times changed and moved and went forward, now China pretty much controls the crude oil industry in Venezuela. And just me thinking in logic, putting y'all up on game. My logic may or may not be right, but I think that has a lot to do with this administration putting pressure on China through these actions, because if they can get a regime change in Venezuela, they can influence the oil industry and how it can shift back to America. So I think ultimately this is a very calculated move. It's combating drugs, it's combating fentanyl, but at the same time it's applying pressure on China, because outside of China, Venezuela is China's, it's almost like their own independent oil refinery, oil company. And anywhere else China has to buy oil from them, where Venezuela, China controls it. And I think that it's a multi-dimensional chess game that the administration is playing. And if they can apply that pressure on China on the oil side, that will give them more leverage on the natural minerals and the natural resources that China has basically cut off. But China is spoon feeding the U.S. the minerals that they need, but also using that as leverage on the trade negotiation. So you see how we kind of going down in these weeds, and you seeing where this trickles off over to here and that trickles off over there. And see, what a lot of Americans don't realize is that the stuff you see on the news is not as simple as it may seem. It's much deeper under the surface than what you just see on a quick 10-minute 2-3 minute news article or whatever.
Talk about Venezuela as a narco state, but I don't necessarily, it's not clear whether designating it as a former a cartel, what difference that could make. Can you talk about like what the administration is sort of thinking behind all this?
I mean, for the Trump administration, the designation opens up more options of what they can do in Venezuela and opens a broader justification for them doing things in Venezuela right now. But I think what's interesting, there's a lot of confusion about why exactly the Trump administration would want to get involved in Venezuela and is doing what it's doing. What we hear the majority of the time is the focus on the drug trafficking. The reality is that.
Okay, y'all see the point she just made. She said, why? And that's why I'm explaining what I'm explaining. It's way deeper than, oh, it's just some drugs coming across the border. It's tied to oil, China controlling it, or it's way bigger than that. So y'all pay attention.
The majority of drug trafficking is not just through Venezuela, it's through Colombia, it's through Mexico. So the focus on Venezuela raises some questions about why. Now, Venezuela is has the largest oil reserves, proven oil reserves in the world. There's a question about if there is a calculus about what this would mean for the United States domestically if we had access to oil in Venezuela. And I think there's another piece, which is Trump himself has talked so much about migration patterns from Venezuela. So is there some type of interest in destabilizing Venezuela, ousting its leader, Nicolas Maduro, if there's a calculus that would impact the region and if that would impact bringing new leadership into the country?
Yeah, and then in the Times, your paper of record, the Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan came to the...
Okay, and another point I want to bring up is that China, independent Chinese company, which we know is owned by China, damn near owns all of Venezuela's oil fields. And so the only way you can shift that or change that is a regime change. Like, you can't come in and force those independent companies and to getting rid of their assets that they legally bought. What happened is over the last probably 30 or 40 years, China used leverage and money to accumulate Venezuela's oil field and oil production. As Venezuela's money got decoupled, as the inflation went sky high, as China was bottlenecking them and feeding them the money they needed to keep going and keep moving forward. And then it got to a point to where all their oil revenue was going straight to China. So that's when the country ultimately resulted to corruption and drugs, because that was literally the only way they could make money outside of their oil, which they had already basically swindled and given away to China over time. And so the bigger picture here is that it's not about drugs. Drugs is a small proportion of it, but drugs is what will lead to the overall agenda of where we are trying to get. And that is get control of that oil. But it's just me speculating. Please like, subscribe. We are moving towards 100K subs extremely fast. I appreciate the support, and I hope everyone has a blessed day.